So now we have the WPF application with the settings page ready to go, and it's trying to update the user profile details. That's what we need to now add to the server. So in this video, we're going to add the server code that allows the user to update the user credentials and return the new credentials to them. So let's get to it. So we're going to open up the server project and we'll start by adding these functions. It should be fairly simple. We're not going to test it from the client side. We've already got functions and calls that the client makes, so I'm fairly confident that'll be fine. What we're going to do is add the server code to this project, and then in the next video we'll jump onto the WPF and tie in the real calls to make sure everything works. So let's get started. Let's just open the project up and let's see where we go from there. So we've got the Fasetto Word web server. Let's just build. That's fine. Let's just run. Make sure it all runs okay. So it spins up. Everything seems to always open in my bottom monitor, not my top. I can see we've got the thing booting up and spinning and connecting as normal. So there's nothing gone wrong since the last time. Now, what I'd also recommend that to do every probably few weeks maybe, or maybe even a week, depends on your schedule, is to always keep your packages up to date. So let's just open the NuGet package manager and update our packages for the solution. So let's just right click on the solution, manage NuGet packages for solution, and go to updates, and let's update all of this lot. Most importantly, the DNA framework is now 1073 in order to allow the functionality that we need in this this video. So make sure you at least update the DNA framework if nothing else. I think the ASP.NET Core might complain because it's trying to update to 2.1. Yeah, so it's just moaning that 2.1 isn't compatible with 2.0. One thing we'll do again after this video is we will update the server to ASP.NET 2.1. So right now it's 2.0. It doesn't really change anything for us. We're not using any features different than 2.1. So update them, you'll be left with two that can't update. And again, just compile, let it restore everything and build successfully. And we can also test that after that, importantly, to also run the server up again to make sure this actually still spins up without issue. Because when you update your package manager code, some things can and do fail. So it's spun up, it's there. I'm presuming everything's good to go there. So now we really need to just get on to adding a function in the API controller is where we will put the code. And we've got a register. We have, let's see what we do have. We've got a login, a register, a verify email. We've got this private one that was just for testing, I believe, at the time. So that can go. But what we want to do here is add a new function. So we'll have a public async task that returns an API response, and then already we now need something to respond to. We need the user details. So in there, well, actually we've got two things. One, we want to return the user's details to the WPF application in case it needs it. So for that, when you first log in with the login async call, we return this new response here. Which is we return the token, but at the same time we just return the credentials as well. So we kind of might as well just return the whole credentials and probably rename this login call. So in here, let's just do the login result API model and call this get user profile. I think that's it. And we can start by pasting that in there. Let's just chuck a comment in. Returns the user's profile details based on the logged in or authenticated user. So that needs to be. Now the other thing in this as well is right now we're kind of chucking on, well, at the minute we have, let's just collapse these. Open that. I did remember a shortcut for doing that, but I forgot because I don't use it enough. Let me just have a quick look. it was outlining, stop outlining, or collapse definition, control MO, I think it was, to get to this stage. So we have register and login and verify all need to be anonymous. And we should also start regioning these codes. Let's just chuck a region around here. Login, register, verify. But going forward, other than now really those 3 calls and maybe the odd other call, the rest want to be authorized calls. So instead of having to add authorized token to every call except these 3, we should instead probably just add the authorized token to the controller so everything inherits that it needs to be authorized, and then just explicitly state that these are allow anonymous, and do it the opposite way around, so that the one that's used least, which would be that one, we only have to repeat 3 times instead of having to repeat authorized token over and over. Plus, it's kind of security by default, which is much safer than, say, you have an option to delete a user or do some action that is dangerous, and you simply forget to put the authorized token on the code. Whereas this way around, if you accidentally forget to put allow anonymous, they simply can't log in, so they can't do damage. So it's safer that way around. I'm pretty sure once you tag the controller, this will take precedent over the token. That's the whole point. So that should be all okay. And we'll soon find out because we'll have to log into the server. So we have a call here, which is get user profile. So this wants to really return just what the login was returning. And obviously we've got to get that info. So we can also take a look at how we've already got the user's info in, I think, home controller somewhere. If not, we'll type it out and just see if we do have somewhere we've already made use of it. No, we don't. Okay, so if we want to get the validated user, the WPF application is going to send in the JWT token. And because in our startup class, we have add JWT bearer, and we've set all this up, and we've done a video on this. If you just look for the, the JWT token video, which means now if we pass a token that we generated through this extension method when we generate the token, then when it comes back in, it will naturally, as part of the authorized token call, this JWT will attempt to authorize a token based on a header that's got an authorized header or authenticator, I forget which way around it is. So that will automatically end up coming in here and having in the http context.user, this claims principal will be filled with details from the JWT token. That's how it works. That's why when we did http context.user identity.name, that was pulled in from the JWT token. And that was because, in fact, we might have an issue here. That was because we did this default name claim token, which you see the big name here. That's the one that the user manager uses to fill in the name, or rather the identity. It's used to get this name from that specific claims identity. I've also just remembered that when we come to now, that's the name, which is fine. That will get the user's name. But if we want the actual user, so get user claims, and then to do that, we do the user manager dot get user, and in there it's asking for a claims principal. So for that, it's the http context dot user. Now the way this gets the user is if you look at the source code, you won't in here because I don't think I've got anything installed to dig deep, but in this call, it will get the user, and you can see here it's attempting to returns the user corresponding to the identity options claims identity user ID claims type. So it's after fetching the user, not based on the name which we have, but based on the name identifier, the ID. So as well as the username and I've put a note, so using identity name fills out this. We also need to add user ID, so that user manager get user async can find the user based on ID. And to do that, it's just a new claim again. And as we've seen in the comments, and again, I know this because I dug into the actual source code to find out, it is, sorry, not claims identity, claim types, there we go. Claim types, and it's the name identifier. And you can see that just returns a string. So it's returning the thing that the user manager is expecting to look for to find the user ID. And I'll show you that when we debug in the WPF video after this one. So we pass that in, and all we need to do is pass in the user's ID. And this, as the comment now mentions, will allow the user manager to get the user async to find the user. A little stop here. So obviously I mentioned in the last video I did was about commenting, and you've seen it's a big, hot topic, if you will. A lot of people saying that you shouldn't, and that's the whole point of doing the video. That so many people think they don't have to comment, and they try and say if you simply name your code right, name your variables right, all this stuff, that comments are not valid. So you go ahead and explain to me then how you'd name your variables to explain this point and this point alone. So you're going to tell me that you can name this, that somebody looking at that knows that it means that the user manager.get user async can find the user based on that. I mean, you can't defend that. Your comments are required. So that's just a little point out, and I'm going to keep doing this throughout the videos to kind of really reinforce the importance of comments. But I just thought I'd stop because that's a perfect example right there of where comments are useful. And to be honest, every line that we write is kind of, perfect example. Which one's easier to say? You're generating a token. Generate a token, or this big long thing here. So that's that. So this is very important in order for the user manager.get user async to work. So we add that here now, and we can now get the user. This will be filled with the claims from the JWT token, and this should now find the user. So that should get us the actual user that we need. Right, so the other thing we'll also need is a list of errors, or basically a list of string, which will be errors. Create new list of empty errors. And this is because the call to the data side of things, the entity framework, can fail for multiple reasons, and it can return multiple errors as well. And as we've done somewhere else, let's change that to async is the name. We've done somewhere else in code the same logic of errors. Here we go. This kind of logic here in register async, that we do a call to the database, the entity frame. Well, actually, it's not the entity framework directly. This is the user manager side of things. But this returns a result that can have multiple errors. So then we join them all together. So what we'll do is this same kind of logic at the end, and then because we're repeating this statement over and over, we're going to make an extension method to do that. So we start with the errors as empty, we get the user, and then if we have no user, so if user equals null, then in fact we don't need to do brackets because it's a one-liner. We're going to return a new API response. Now in this call, the get user profile, we'll just return actually an API response of that. That's correct. Now I was thinking of the next call we're going to do. So in there we just do error message, and again a to do localization, which we will get onto shortly. And we can say user not found. So we have our own user, return error. And in fact, we are, let's see, we might need that, we might not. Otherwise, we will have, oh no, we don't need, I'm thinking of the next call we're doing. We don't need the errors list here. So we get the user. If we don't have it, we return false. If we do have it, then we've got the details we need. And we just return the response containing that info. The token we don't know. The token's, in theory, you could return the token, but it's been passed in and deserialized and handled, and the user shouldn't need to know their own token because they've sent it in order to validate. So all they need is this response. But now we're using the same kind of login result API model. The only thing that really makes this a login result is that it includes a token. So I'm quite happy to make use of this model. We could make another model that's simply user profile API model, and this includes that plus an API plus a token. But to be honest, we can just share this as being the user profile model, and just simply not provide it with a token when somebody's asking for the profile details. That's only provided on login, and simply make a note in the comments. So the authentication used to stay authenticated in future, and you can do, I believe, notes in here, remarks. The token is only provided when pulled from the login methods. So that'll do for that. We will rename this, I think, to user profile API model. I don't know, it's user profile details, I guess. User profile details API model. The result of a login request via API. Nope, the result of a login request or get user profile details request by API. And then that is it. So now we have shared logic. Go to the login result, rename it to the name of our class. And now this looks more appropriate to user profile details, and we return those details. You'll notice we don't have error handling in here yet. And again, that's purposeful. I want to get to the point where we have localization, and then we have a global exception handler, and then we needed login exception. We needed login error codes and localization before we really want to start doing exceptions, so it can be done correctly. So that's why there's no error handling right now as such. Is in unexpected exceptions. So that's the get user profile call. So now let's move on to a public async task. And this is going to be the, what is this going to be? This is the return. So really this is just wants to return successful or not. There's nothing else to really return. So the API response, does it actually let us do that? API response with nothing. Let's see. So this will be update user profile async. And just like we've done in these, we'll do a from body to pull it in from the JSON. And this now we need a update user profile API model, which we don't have. So in the API models, I think I've got the new extension installed, Shift F2. Yep. Update user profile API model.cs. There we go. And this will be, let's just have a look at what we comment on the API models. The credentials for an API client to log in. So we'll match a similar, kind of a similar approach. We should also probably separate these into, are these all results? No, some are sending. Why do we have one result there? We simply not returned a result yet. Register result API model. Anyway, I'll leave that clean up for now. So we just want to do a similar comment here in terms of the same style. The credentials for an API client to log in. So this is the details to change for a user profile. Change for a user profile. From an API client. And this will be public string first name, the new first name, or null to leave the same. And what we'll do here is the user then, if they want to update the first name, simply passes a new class with just first name filled out and last name left as null and everything else left as null by default. And that allows them to, or rather allows us to have a single call that updates everything in the whole, you can update everything in one, or just one thing, or multiple, without having to call multiple different functions. And we'll base it off the simple fact that we'll have nullable values. So if we weren't using something that was nullable, like an int isn't nullable, we'd put a question mark to make it nullable. But because string's a nullable thing anyway, we can use it this way. So the new last name or null to leave, in fact unchanged is probably better. Unchanged. I think they're all strings, so we'll have email. And this will obviously fire off a verify email, validate email call again. The new email or null to leave unchanged. And we're not doing password in here because that should really be a separate call to, you know, change your password. That's a very specific action. So this won't be username. String username. The new username or null to leave unchanged. So I think that's all the details of this call. We don't need the API in the namespace, I believe. No. So there's our class. We can now pass in our model from the WPF application. Now it's finally complaining that we can't do that, I'm presuming. Yep. Okay, so we now have the model that comes in. So this really, when you update the profile, it basically wants to either return an error or simply it worked. And the API response we have right now is a generic. It needs some kind of response. So we just want to flip this on its head slightly. And let's remove the generic to start with and have simply an object. So if we don't specify a type, we simply have an object as the type for response and we don't make use of it. And then on top of that, we'll then just have a public class API response of generic that's basing itself off API response. And we'll have a public T response. So public new T response. And the get will simply return the base response. And the set will return the base response, the base response equals value. And what you're going to complain about now, cannot implicitly convert from type T. Yes, you can. There we go. So this will be the API response object as T. Because all we've really done is, whenever you set it, you set the base property, so the object is storing it. And when you're getting it, you're simply getting the base property and you're casting it to a T all the time. You could do, just as a fail-safe, you could do like as T, so that if it was null, it would be null. But you can't have a class, you haven't got a class constraint on there. So we could add a class constraint and do it that way. But in theory, when you're making this object, in order to use this, there's no thing set here. If we were to do, say, this, and make a string, then this would obviously now, or rather this would crash, if you will. But we're not setting a default type. So that will simply be a default object, which is null, which means this won't fail. So the purpose and the way we use this, it won't have an issue. So this one is the same again. It's the response for all web API calls made with a specific type of known response. And that's the nod at the T. And then this is the specific type of server response. So with that done now, we can make use of an API response without having to pass a type in, because we're not going to return any actual data. We're just going to return successful or not. So that allows us to do that without having to pass in extra details. This now returns the returns successful response if the update was successful. Otherwise, returns the errors in the, or otherwise returns the error reasons for the failure. So pretty generic but straightforward response. The updated user profile details, or the user profile details to update. Returns, that's what that does. So actually return successful. So really that should be the returns. That's one thing I'm actually really bad at, is not using the returns tab of the comments. Now instead the summary, I guess, should be, in fact I also like to tab multi-lines out. I just don't do for the summary either. Yeah, that probably start looking neater doing that as well, tabbing in. I don't want to start changing styles for now though. So the summary attempts to update the user's profile details. See, that makes much more sense now. So this is what it does. It attempts to update the user profile details, and this is what it returns. That's a better comment. Right, so in order to update, so here we go. So make a list of empty errors. And that's a new list of string. And then we want to get the current user. So user equals user manager get user, and I mentioned this before. This gets it from the bearer token, and that's the way we've authenticated. If we have no user, so if user equals null, turn new API response with an error message of user not found, and to do localization, which we will definitely have to do. So if we have that, we've now got a user. So now it's, if we have a first name, so model.first name isn't equal to null, then the user.firstname, helps if you await that call. The async in the name is kind of a big hint. So if the user.firstname equals model.firstname. So we have the first name, update the profile details. And then we've got first name, last name, email, username. And if you are going to copy and paste, be super careful that you actually update everything. Model first name, let's also check, do we have email in this way? Can we just email it this way? Gets or sets, yes. We'd also want to double check if the user manager is smart enough that when we set the email, it unconfirms it, if you will. Which I'm guessing we could also manually do, and then double check when we come to call. Or to be honest, we could just be playing it safe and actually set it. Does it tell us we can, yeah, set? So I'm guessing it won't. So the email is slightly different. So if we have an email isn't equal to null, update the profile details. So update the email, unverify the email, send new verification email. And in fact, we shouldn't do that until we've saved successfully to make sure it can actually change to that. So unverify is obviously not a word. I'm going to leave it as unverify. I don't know any other word. Unconfirm, I guess. No. Yeah, well, unverify is a new word from me. So what we'll have up here is a flag var changed email equals false. Keep track of email change. In fact, that should also be, if it's not equal to null, and string.equals model.email user.email. So let's just make sure. We can also use email normalized, I think. Normalized email. But it won't matter for the, well, no, let's use normalized. Can we normalize this as well? Is there, yeah, for now that's fine. One thing we can do is to just do trim start of any spaces. Or in fact, an email should never have a space, so just simply replace spaces with nothing. So we've cleaned up those spaces. If we have an email, and it's not the same, then we change it, basically. So if it's not equal, update the email, unconfirm, email change or changed email equals true. I prefer email changed. Flag, we have changed email. So that's the email changed. If we have a username, so username, we can still, username on not even changed. I presume we can change the username here. Gets or sets, yep. So it will equal, have a username, update the profile. So that is all of the code there. We can also region this off if you wanted to chunk this. Now it's starting to get a little bit long. So declare, which is just declaring variables. So this depends how far you want to go in cleaning up calls, but again, once they start getting really more than 20 lines, you should kind of wrap them up a little bit. This is then get user, and then this is update profile. And then once we've updated the profile, we now need to commit or save profile. So we've got all the info we need. We now just simply need to say var result equals await the user manager dot update, and we just pass in the new user, or rather the same user just with the edited details. And this is where, so attempt to commit changes to data store, and then check results or respond, because one way or the other we're going to respond. We can also say if successful, send out email verification. So if result.succeeded, and then if we look at when we register, I guess, API calls register, let's take a quick look what we did. We create the user, if successful, get the user details, generate a code, replace with API routes, email sender. So all that really is sending a verification email, and that should kind of be wrapped. So we have a static sender that accepts the URL. So really we want to wrap this in another call. For now, we can just put this in the API controller in a private helper that will use the user. That's all it needs. So we'll just wrap this in a private helper for now. Send user email verification. And that's also got to be asynchronous. And then we'll cut this and we'll generate that. Control dot. And paste that in. That will have to be async at the end of the name. This wants a user, which is a application user. I could have done the extract function, which would have actually made this a lot quicker as well. But never mind. So that's the user, private async task. Sends the given user a new verify email link. The user to send the link to, and it returns nothing. It's a task, so it's void. This will just cut now, move out and go all the way down here. Have a new region called private helpers. And again, we can always relocate this if we need to, but it's fine where it is. That call now is after user identity. Of course it is. So user identity is just part of that, so that can be cut as well. And paste it into there, which is also, of course, you want to use that as well. Registered credentials.username. Well, if we've registered, then its user surely already has the username. Yes, it does. So we can just replace that with user.username. Or not. Username, slightly different. Right, so user identity does everything that we've already done, so nothing's changed, so there shouldn't be an issue. Now we can make use of that call. So pop back up here, comment, send email verification, or rather send, email verification, email technically, or just say send email verification of the user. That's it. Copy that. So once we've successfully registered, we send that off and return. So it's a nice one line now. And then the same here, if we change the email, send an email verification. So we don't send this until we know we've definitely just updated the user's email and flagged it as no longer valid. So that's that. Then the save profile. And then finally the response. So if we get here now, don't forget we'll get here if we failed or not. We've simply done one quick check there if we failed. So even though we've done that, we need to say if result.succeeded. So if we were successful, then you just return a new response. As we mentioned, we don't do anything with it. We don't return any details. The simple fact that we return a response by default with no errors means it's successful. So return successful response. Otherwise, so if we get here, then otherwise if it failed, return the failed response. So that would be return new API response, and this is where we want the helper function now, remember. So if we go back up to the register, I think we said it was in, and we've already done this kind of logic already here. So really it's an extension of IEnumerable identity errors. Where to put that? So identity errors first, is that in ASP.NET specific? Extensions, identity. Yeah, so it's in identity, and identity is really an ASP.NET core thing. So it wants to stay in the web server project for now at least. And we have no real folder for it. So we'll make a new folder, identity. We'll make a new file in there called identity error extensions.cs. Correct the namespace. And this will be extension methods for identity. Oh, let's just get the identity error class, and that will work in a minute when we make use of it. So public static class identity extensions, public static aggregate errors. We'll pass in the identity error control dot, there we go, IEnumerable of identity errors, call that errors, and we want to return a single string. Oh, caps lock went on. So it combines all errors into a single string with each error separated by a new line. The errors to aggregate. Combines all the errors into a single string. That is the return. So returns a string with each error separated by a new line. Yeah, I want to try and get used to using this returns and separating the the summary from the value it returns. So now this can be, cut all that out and just do aggregate errors, like so. That looks nicer. And this can be return errors to list, blah, blah, blah. So get all errors into a list. Grab their description and combine them with a new line separator. And there we go. We have a nice helper method there. Clean up the unused namespaces. And now we've got a single line that we can just aggregate specific errors from the user manager calls. And now all we need to do is make use of that there, where we just say error message equals results.errors.aggregated errors. And that is now a single call as well. So I think that is it. The fun thing with this is now we obviously need to build the WPF side of things in order to test this, but I'm fairly confident this will work, so I'm not overly sort of fussed about that. Oh, we've got some errors. Wasn't paying attention. What if I mistyped? Apparently nothing. User identity. What have I done here? What have I changed? Register. Response is... Oh, did I have... Oh, I got user identity, oops, in here. And then we made use of the same thing. So we've got two calls there for cleaning up that, but I'm not overly bothered about the double call, just for the benefit of having that in a single function. Does that build now? Oh, chucked a semicolon on the end of the property. Never noticed that. So that now builds, but basically, as I mentioned, the calls that we're going to use now to hit those up are going to be in the WPF application. We don't have any unit testing right now to fire this off, and we don't have any real way of... Well, we do have a way. We could use something like Postman to construct a JSON object and fire it in. But to be honest, I'm not that fussed right now. We've got a WPF application that we run on the same machine. We just need to add the code there. Then we'll do some kind of live debugging. If there are any issues with the server, then we will do that in the next ASP video, if you will. But hopefully there's no errors in this code. It's fairly straightforward and clean. So we'll move on to the WPF side of things now to fire off the event to try and update these. And then we'll go from there. So as always, I hope you find these videos useful. Any comments, just leave them in the description and I'll get back to you. And I'll see you in the next one.